In a battle over my beloved truck, can a federal judge wield laughter and justice against a pastel, wearing HOA queen, or will I be forced to pay for their delusions? As the sun rose like a flaming beacon over the horizon, I could hear the unmistakable drone of lawnmowers humming to life in perfect unison, like some twisted version of an HOA-approved marching band. With every rev of the engines and chirp of the dreaded HOA regulation whistles, my blood boiled just a tad more. My eyes squinted against the brightness, and hardly a trace of morning cheer was to be found in my wretched heart. Instead, I grasped the steaming mug of coffee with a vice-like grip, hoping with all my judicial willpower that I could outrun the oncoming storm of absurdity. Because, let's be real, nothing says good morning like an HOA's harassment over a couple $100 in unpaid dues while I'm parked hopelessly in my stylish, beloved truck, oblivious to the manicured horrors around me. Last night, I received a formal notice from Gary Palmerson, the crown queen of our little suburban kingdom, tight-lipped, platinum blonde, and armed with a committee of perfectly preened lawn care enforcers. "Your truck is an eyesore," she had declared. My truck! The very symbol of my freedom, resilience, and, let's face it, of my questionable taste. Defiance ran through its rugged chassis like gasoline through a rebel's veins. I launched into a tirade over coffee with my wife Carmen, gesturing wildly with unyielding fervor as I bemoaned my plight. They want me to pay for what? To fund their garden party of entitlement? Let me tell you, sweetheart, I'm more of a bring-my-own-bourbon kind of gal. It wasn't just about the dues for me. Oh no, this was David versus Goliath, with my trusty truck standing in for the meek young shepherd armed with naught but a slingshot, albeit a hefty one. I'd been a judge long enough to know the difference between what was right and what was sheer insanity, and Gary walked that line like a tightrope artist after one too many cocktails at a HOA function. Her entitlement is only matched by her pastel wardrobe, I sighed dramatically, thinking about how her floral blouses clashed spectacularly against her iron-fisted demeanor. The idea that the HOA could escalate to vehicle arson over my stubbornness was both revolting and, in that moment, just a touch amusing. Pay the dues, save the truck, was not a mantra I was about to adopt. Tommy Hess, my ever-relaxed neighbor with the no-nonsense cargo shorts and a relentlessly quirky sense of humor, wandered by while I was in mid-rant. "Morning, Judge. Still at war with the tyrants?" he called out, a playful smirk dancing on his lips. "Why not just pay them? How far could $200 really go?" Ah, Tommy. His laid-back demure often provided the comic relief in our dramatic HOA skirmishes. I wanted to roll my eyes, but the truth was, I needed him on my team. I wanted to say something profound about justice and the struggles of the oppressed. But instead I replied, "Tommy, imagine paying for someone else's delusions of grandeur. I can't fund a tyranny and keep my truck safe." After all, it was a law I had etched in my mind during my years on the bench. Sometimes you stand firm not for personal gain but to confront the ludicrous behaviors of those more consumed by power than perspective. Gary and the HOA were already in my sights, and I envisioned this little tete-a-tete as my courtroom drama set in a sitcom-like community. The stakes had never been clearer, and if Tommy wanted to join, I knew he would support my crusade like a true blue sidekick against a not-so-merry band of garden gnomes. As the day wore on, my misbegotten truck sat resolutely in the driveway, mine to defend and bicker over until the end of time. With renewed passion, I gathered my arsenal. Witness statements from fellow neighbors, comparisons to worse-looking vehicles down the block, also unpaid but somehow exempt from Jerry's wrath, and a particularly snarky appeal to the HOA for a set of "this truck is just fine" decals. My courtroom experience swirled in combination with my uniquely stubborn temperament. Righteous indignation may have just hit its peak. Gary and her HOA warriors had no idea what they were about to unleash. With steely resolve and a smirk chiseled on my face, I planned my next steps with glee. It was not just about saving my vehicle. It was about standing up to entitlement dressed in pastel. The impending confrontation with Gary felt like a delicious piece of warm revenge cake, and I couldn't wait to dig in. Irony hung deliciously in the air. Who knew a morning of lawnmowers would lead to a judicial showdown with an utterly unaware HOA? It sure promised to be one heck of a judicial ride, and I was ready to take the wheel. The battle had only just begun, but with every moment, the anticipation sparked brighter. As I stood at the precipice of the HOA meeting, visions of my truck still encased in smoke, I couldn't help but think of how comically dire the situation had become. There I was, a federal judge with a penchant for justice, preparing to battle an oddly assembled coven of pastel-wearing, entitlement-fueled lawn enforcers. With every tick of the clock echoing in the fluorescent lights above, I felt like a gladiator striding into the Colosseum, the whispers of an onlooking crowd fueling my fire. A part of me reveled in the absurdity of it all. Who knew that my reputation for unyielding fairness would soon lead me to defend my vehicle from the frenzied clutches of HOA madness? As I pushed through the double doors of the community center, I was met with a sight that could only be described as a scene out of some ridiculous parody. Gary sat, regally poised at the head of the table, her impeccably designed floral blouse seeming to radiate an air of authority that made me want to cough from the sheer stifling atmosphere. Karen, my old foe with the regrettable haircut resembling an overturned mop, waved a stack of papers like she was casting magic spells of disdain. "We're so glad you could join us, Jordan," Jerry said with that saccharine sweetness that dangerously masked the acidity of her tone. "Great. Time to charm the socks off these community upholders while also delivering a body blow of justice." With the gusto that only seemed to pour out of me in these dramatic moments, I cleared my throat and unleashed my meticulously crafted tirade. "Ladies and gentlemen of the illustrious Homeowners Association, I'm here to address what can only be characterized as a trifling yet farcical attack on my beloved truck. Apparently, Gary has declared my vehicle a blight upon this fair community." Gasps echoed, as if I had revealed a shocking scandal rather than merely defending a truck I cherished for its ruggedness and occasional charm. The absurdity of the gathering struck me. Here we were in a community adorned with meticulously trimmed hedges and newly painted mailboxes, debating whether a rusty truck was more of an eyesore than the pastel blasphemies on their backs. "You must understand, my tenure on the bench gives me a unique perspective," I continued, exhilarating in both the chuckles and stunned silence of my audience. "As much as I love a good suburban debate, we cannot meet the standard of neighborhood decency by lighting torches and chasing out the differences among us." I gestured towards Tommy, who gleefully sported a graphic tee emblazoned with a quote about calling out authoritarian reign. My trusty ally beamed with that laid-back grin of his, a true testament to my sidekick status in this courtroom drama masquerading as a community meeting. The room pulsed with tension. Gary had gone from controlling authority figure to cornered animal, her fragile facade cracking under the weight of my words. And then, just like that, Karen shot her hand up as though she were hoping to signal a plane circling above. "Perhaps if you could just pay the dues, Judge, we can put this whole eyesore incident behind us," she chirped, her ridiculous hair bobbing like a poodle on caffeine. I couldn't help but let out a laugh that danced between incredulous disbelief and delightful mirth. "Why, yes, Karen. Let's just whip out my checkbook to fund your tyrannical vision of neighborhood couture." My voice dripped with irony, and I suddenly felt as though I were both the judge and the jury in this theatrical production. In an unexpected twist, Jerry's icy demeanor melted away slightly as I witnessed a flicker of amusement in her eyes. Did I just win the room? Did Gary Palmerson actually respect my playful defiance, albeit for a fleeting moment? My heart raced at the tantalizing thought of turning this battleground into a space of absurd camaraderie, bantering over the wayward whims of neighborhood governance. With each laugh and chuckle exchanged, I realized my mission transcended the truck. It was a rallying cry for every resident who'd been stifled by the clutches of entitlement and oversensitivity. Maybe, just maybe, I could orchestrate change without the need for full-fledged artillery. In the final moments of the meeting, I dropped my bombshell like a gavel slam that echoed through the room. "Perhaps you're unaware, but I'm not just any resident here, folks. I am Jordan Blake, a federal judge. The very definition of justice, not some wilting flower succumbing to HOA demands." The collective gasps that followed would have made the best soap opera producers proud, and I could almost hear the sizzle of their shocked souls. Suddenly, there was newfound fear and respect for my judicial authority, and a smirk crept onto Gary's otherwise pursed lips. "Ah, well, this changes things," she stammered, her confidence wavering like a house of cards caught in a breeze. "Game on, HOA. My trusty truck might just survive this encounter after all." With this unexpected twist in my favor, I couldn't help but feel a surge of determination and excitement bubbling within me, primed for the next phase of this epic neighborhood saga. As the meeting disbanded, in a cacophony of whispered shock and reverberating gasps, I strode out, my head held high and my heart pulsating with righteous indignation. The claustrophobic walls of the community center had never felt more stifling. I was ready to burst into the welcoming air of freedom and revelry. At the same time, I couldn't shake the absurdity of the situation. There I was, a federal judge being accosted over HOA dues, and not even a dignified courtroom at my disposal. I needed to decompress, and the only remedy to my judicial angst? Pints at Miller's Dive Bar, the unofficial local hub for all matters scandalous, audacious, and occasionally absolutely ridiculous. Stepping into Miller's, I was greeted by the familiar embrace of laughter and the sweet tang of beer on tap, a definite upgrade from the tightly wound HOA drama. Tommy was already there, perched on a stool and flipping through the bar's infamous dartboard. "Judge Blake, what brings you to the nefarious world of neighborhood taverns? Troubling HOA wizards giving you a run for your gavel?" he teased, his voice light and buoyant like a summer breeze. I slid onto the stool beside him, setting my glass down for effect. "Tommy, you're looking at a woman whose truck has conspired to spontaneously combust thanks to the HOA. I replied dramatically, gesturing as if the fire was still licking at those tire rims. Tommy leaned in, eyes wide with mock horror mixed with uncontainable laughter. "Wait, am I hearing this right? They actually torched your truck? Talk about taking anti-vehicle sentiment to a new level. I'd say those dues are the least of your worries now. You might have a serious arson case on your hands." The absurdity of it rolled off my tongue like the expertly poured beer before me. Right? Is burning my beloved vehicle truly the highest of their HOA standards? I must have missed the memo where setting fire to dissent was listed beneath color of mailbox guidelines. I chortled, drowning my indignation in laughter, thankful for a friend who had the sense to laugh at the absurdity alongside me. As we sank deeper into our frosty ales, I couldn't help but brainstorm my next legal maneuvers for vengeance. "You know," I ventured, "this feels like the perfect opportunity for a community awareness campaign. I could organize a neighborhood forum on wrongful HOA practices. Imagine the possibilities. Burning trucks and hoedown fun." Tommy burst out laughing, his graphic tee quaking with delight. "I don't know, Judge, but I'd be there with bells on. Ever thought about inviting Jerry? Only fair she gets a front row seat to her own dumpster fire of a judgment, right?" Charged by the hilarity of my own ideas, I leaned back in my chair, surveying the patrons around me. Gleeful faces, some lost in conversation, others immersed in random acts of karaoke. The whole operation screamed community, an ingredient woefully absent at the HOA meeting. This was the real spirit of our neighborhood. "You know, there's something satisfying about uniting against a common enemy, even one as absurd as Gary Palmerson," I mused, an idea sparking in my mind. "What if we turn this into a comedic campaign against entitlement? Sprinkle on some creativity, maybe a judge versus HOA bake-off? You know, pits of flaming desserts and judges' wild lawsuits?" Emboldened, I whipped my phone out, eager to assemble the neighbors who had so long sat in silence, smothered by the rigid constraints of suburban strictness. "I can host a gathering. We could involve everyone, get the kids, the pets, the whole neighborhood on board for a collaborative uproar against their tyranny," I declared with fervent enthusiasm. "They've thrown a flaming truck my way. It's high time we rally spirits and set fires, of laughter and unity, that is." Tommy grinned widely, perfectly understanding the idiosyncratic enthusiasm permeating my every thought. "Count me in. Let's show Gary what true community spirit looks like, even if that includes redeeming a judicial roast." In the throes of inspiration, I took a hefty gulp of my drink, fueled by vibrant visions of laughter, mischief, and good-natured rebellion against the dicta of entitlement. Each moment fueled my resolve, coaxing forth ideas waiting to leap into action. Who knew a singed truck could ignite that kind of fire in me? I chuckled, preparing to overtake this HOA battle not with fear or submission, but sheer tenacity and the unwillingness to retreat into silence. Tomorrow I would summon my neighbors for the grandest of gatherings, flamboyant refreshments, laughter that could shake the very rafters of that dull community center, and most importantly, a commitment to collective action against a petty HOA that had underestimated their adversary. And as I planned my revenge amidst the shared laughter and camaraderie, I realized my truck wasn't the only thing glowing brightly. I'd rekindled a spark within our community, ready to burn down the walls of entitlement with a bonfire of humor, audacity, and justice. Fueled by the intoxicating brew of rebellion and the echoes of laughter that filled Miller's Dive Bar, I mapped out my mission. Operation Blow the Lid Off the HOA was officially in progress. I imagined flyers plastered across neighborhood mailboxes, bold headlines screaming, "Got a flamethrower? No? Join the party instead." Sure, it was a tad avant-garde, but who could resist a neighborhood event where we toppled the titan of entitlement with humor? Luckily, my federal judge powers included a flair for the dramatic and a knack for stirring up some chaotic cheer when duty called. Tommy clinked his glass against mine, grinning like a kid in a candy store. "You really mean it, Judge? A neighborhood gathering?" I can already see the enthusiastic response. "Free snacks! Bring your flaming trucks!" He mimicked, waving a makeshift sign with exaggerated enthusiasm, and I couldn't stifle my giggles. It felt too good to align our community's disgruntlement in a way that was both cathartic and uproariously entertaining. I envisioned a grand gathering where Gary Palmerson could witness her own little revolt, the townspeople standing up against her from behind a buffet table bedecked with sugar cookies shaped like trucks. Naturally, the first step was to draft the most powerful letter the HOA had ever seen. I donned my sharpest legal garb at home. A fierce red blazer balanced my judicial power with an audacity designed to scare even the most stoic of board members. Fingers ablaze with furious purpose, I hacked away at my keyboard like a warrior preparing for battle, weaving together tales of neighborly grievances that would make even the most seasoned HOA members cringe in despair. I was on a mission to outline every wild HOA rule that had driven my neighbors mad. Flammable decorations in October? Check. The absurdity of assessing wall paint colors? Double check. As soon as my email hit the send button, I could almost hear the collective gasp echoing through our neighborhood, the thrilling sound of rebellion on the brink of erupting. Determined to unleash the chaos that simmered below the surface, I recruited Tommy to help refine my strategy. The next day, we pasted flyers on every mailbox, from Gary's pastel-colored lawn to the corner park. Join Judge Blake for a neighborhood forum, burning questions and trucks about HOA regulations. I could see Jerry's carefully manicured eyebrows lifting in horror when she read it. Oh, how the tables would turn. The day of the event dawned bright and hopeful, though I wouldn't have minded a touch of drama in the weather, to be honest. Picture it. Storm clouds gathering as we gathered for revenge, everybody united under the banner of rectitude and hilarity. I donned my black blazer once more, this time decked out in a blaze of color, hot pinks and electric blues. Bless the HOA bylaws that insisted on our monochromatic palette. I arrived at the park early, the scent of barbecued optimism wafting through the air. Neighbors were already flocking in, armed with casseroles and the kind of gossip that could light a runaway fire. "Have you heard about Geraldine's accident?" someone whispered loudly while everyone giggled, and as I looked around, giving a sly wink to Tommy as he refined his nacho cheese game in a petulant potluck, I couldn't help but feel a sense of ecstatic camaraderie swelling in my chest. Gary Palmerson's cockpit was dislodged, and my little neighborhood was steering the ship into uncharted waters. We set up tables adorned with paper trucks and hats, made from my dire burning trucks and hoedown fun campaign hashtags. I gave speeches, interspersed with stories that stirred laughter twisted with the drama of our HOA experience. Tommy even jumped in with a running commentary that kept us rolling in tears of joy of collective absurdity. The pièce de resistance came when I theatrically held up a huge t-shirt emblazoned with "Burned but not broken" as my neighbors erupted in applause. Together, we crafted policies of empowerment with a touch of humor, showcasing our tales of HOA madness while uniting friends old and new. Laughter spilled from our circle, and it became clear that this was our respite from Gary's iron-fisted reign. We discussed our carport designs, what color our roses should be, and we even held a friendly best grilled cheese competition in her honor. Little did Gary know, her monopoly on power was about to go up in smoke, just like my truck. That evening, as the fiery sunset melted into twilight, I felt buoyed by the solidarity that enveloped our small neighborhood, untethered from the constraints of the HOA's drudgery. I was no longer just a judge fighting a petty war. I was leading a neighborhood renaissance, rising from the ashes of flaming entitlement into a bright, laughter-filled community. I couldn't wait to send Gary a follow-up email detailing the incredible successes of our rally. Little did she know, a judge and a few passionate residents had the power to turn a tragedy into a comedy that would resonate for years to come. By tomorrow, I had a feeling that the HOA wouldn't know what hit them. The post-event glow was palpable as the sun dipped below the horizon, leaving us basking in not just the fading light, but in a sense of victory that felt nothing short of magnificent. I stood there, surrounded by friends, each face illuminated by the stories of defiance against the HOA, each chuckle infused with the audacity that had finally been unleashed. The air buzzed with whispers of, "Did you see the way Judge Blake called Gary a flaming dictator in that last round of nachos?" followed by bursts of laughter that could drown out an air horn. Who needed the approval of an overbearing HOA when you had this army of laughter at your back? With the success of our neighborhood gathering still bubbling through our veins, I wasted no time in drafting a camaraderie-suffused follow-up email to Gary, my fingers dancing across the keyboard with a renewed enthusiasm. Subject: burning questions regarding HOA compliance. I typed, almost cackling to myself as I envisioned her face upon reading it. I detailed all the improvements we'd brainstormed during the potluck, an open forum for a best driveway decoration contest to thwart her love for boring beige, mandatory ice cream days on the first Saturday of every month. And yes, a heartfelt proposal to allow wacky truck art as a new community standard. Gary would surely find this lascivious humor in every line. I imagined her platinum locks standing on end as she read my words. There was no hiding behind fake decorum anymore. The absurdity was now a delightful weapon, and I was waging war with wit. My phone buzzed incessantly, each ping a reminder of my standing in the community. As I glanced down at the screen, I saw messages of support from neighbors pouring in like a flood of solidarity. "Burned but not broken" was becoming the rallying cry that would echo throughout the neighborhood. Tommy even sent a hilarious video of himself dressed as a flamboyant flaming truck, a cardboard body outfitted with tinsel streamers, dancing in front of his yard. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee on my laptop. But then an idea struck me. What if we hosted a town hall meeting to officially mock the HOA? A roast of sorts, with participation from the entire neighborhood. I could almost hear Gary's perfectly coiffed hair frizzing in outrage at the mere thought, and that thought alone filled my heart with joy. The next week, with a spirit full of mischief and a determination to shatter the illusion of Jerry's dominion, I sent out invitations for the Roast the HOA event alongside our regular neighborhood meetings. Each invitation was an opportunity cloaked in absurdity, a playful slap in the face to Gary's petty psyche. I encouraged everyone to come dressed in their most ridiculous HOA-compliant fashion, where boisterous floral and pastel ensembles would reign supreme. It was impossible to repress the glee I felt as residents eagerly shared their own tales of HOA horror, fueling the excitement of what would be a night filled with laughs and brave confrontations. As if orchestrated by some cosmic force of retribution, right as the big night arrived, Gary sent a flurry of emails claiming that our gathering constituted a community disturbance. How rich! Her attempt to stifle our rebellion only ignited our spirits further. Tommy came up with the brilliant idea of catering the event with cupcakes hilariously shaped like trucks, maybe just a little jab at Gary's more flammable tendencies. The postbox filled with responses from neighbors eager to stand by my side, standing apart from her reign of monochrome malaise. When the event finally rolled around, the air crackled with laughter and anticipation. The park transformed into a dynamic testament to our protest. Bright colors, vibrant decorations, and a fleet of outfits that would make any HOA compliance officer faint. Together we ignited a fiery passion for community spirit that could rival any courtroom drama. From my lofty perch on a makeshift stage, I leaned into my judge persona, only this time it was to deliver a comedic cross-examination of Gary's reign. Every eye twinkled with mischief. I tapped into the theater of our circumstances, asking the crowd-loaded questions like, was Gary's rule more stringent than the IRS during tax season? The roar of laughter that erupted felt liberating. At the climax of the night, as I prepared for the grand finale of comedic theatrics, I whipped out a sledgehammer coated with glitter, mimicking the classic detonation scene from cheesy action movies. Tonight, we smashed through the chains of conformity. Let's choose joy over regulations. The glimmering sledgehammer clashed with the dark confines of HOA supremacy. Jerry's territorial screams became a fading echo in the recesses of our past. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about standing up against Gary Palmerson. It was about celebrating our community's triumph over entitlement, weaving love and laughter into the fabric of our neighborhood. Little did Gary realize, this firestorm of resistance she had unwittingly ignited would soon leave her scrambling for self-relevance. With a community rallying behind a singular cause, more ridiculous than the bylaws that bound us, her iron grip would soon crumble. As laughter faded into the night, I couldn't help but smirk. This rebellion had just begun, and it was about to light up the skies like the 4th of July. Amongst the friends by my side, I could feel the shift in power dynamics, the thrill of justice served, or at least humorously roasted over charred truck bits. And as we gleefully plotted our next steps, the thought crossed my mind that an attorney might yet need to be summoned when a certain HOA president decided it was time to declare war on silly laws. Oh, the sweet scent of impending chaos mixed with victory. What a delightful concoction. The night of the Roast the HOA event arrived with an explosive energy that crackled through the air. The park, once a mundane backdrop to Gary's drab dominion, transformed into a kaleidoscope of color and absurdity. Neighbors gathered, decked out in floral patterns so loud they could make a herd of elephants pause and squint. I watched as Tommy led a gaggle of children in an impromptu dance-off, all of them adorably dressed as gigantic cupcakes, while an elderly couple waltzed by in matching pastel capri pants and tie-dye shirts. Yes, tonight, we chose vibrant chaos over monochrome misery, and its smell was sweeter than any vanilla birthday cake around. I couldn't help but grin at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. As I took my makeshift stage, a gleaming sledgehammer glittering in my hand, the unmistakable laughter of my fellow residents washed over me. I leaned into my performance, channeling my inner historian, eager to recall the bizarre HOA regulations plaguing us, all delivered in my most dramatic courtroom voice. Who amongst us can forget the infamous beige mandate? I teased, pausing for effect as snickers erupted from the throng. It was as if Gary had decreed that even our imaginations had to remain within the confines of a colorless prison. The crowd went wild, hoots of laughter echoing like a symphony of rebellion out into the starlit night. Motivated by the spirit of unity that enveloped us, I decided to escalate the absurdity. The narrative pivoted to the Department of Extreme HOA violations, and I began calling out faux threats. Ladies and gentlemen, if you dare to disregard your HOA guidelines, you might just find yourself on the receiving end of a warning so terrifying it could curdle your morning coffee. Suddenly, a neighbor in the back shouted, "What's worse, Jerry's warning, or your coffee, Judge?" My laughter blended into the collective roar. The absurdity of our shared plight was truly one for the ages. The walls of entitlement that Jerry had erected began to crumble amidst our jokes, leaving us freer and more vibrant than ever. As the evening reached its climax, I prepared for my grand finale. I poised the glitter-covered sledgehammer as if it were Thor's mighty hammer, ready to shatter the very chains Gary's bylaws had emblazoned on our lives. Tonight, we will demolish the drabness of compliance and paint this neighborhood with laughter and joy, I shouted. Returning to dramatic flair, I smashed the sledgehammer down on an oversized cardboard replica of the Anderson-approved beige palette. With every crunch of cardboard, the crowd erupted in exhilaration, visions of Gary's shocked face glittering in my mind's eye. The tangible energy of empowerment pulsed through the crowd like the venom of a viper. They'd never felt this alive before. Jerry's response was predictably furious, and right on cue, as I had anticipated, she stormed up to the crowd, brandishing her authority like an anvil dangling from a tightrope. Dressed in her signature pastels that evening, she looked about as authoritative as a marshmallow in a blender. I couldn't help but chuckle under my breath as she tapped into her long-practiced tone of righteous indignation. "This cannot stand," she pronounced, arms flailing to and fro, as if trying to take flight. "This is a violation of our community rights." In a moment of pure comedic brilliance, Tommy chimed in from the back. "What about our rights to not be bored to death?" The crowd erupted in laughter again, and I could almost see Gary's perfectly coiffed hair frizzing outward as she struggled to regain control of the room. Ultimately, her futile attempt to reclaim dominance just underscored the absurdity of the evening. By the time Roast the HOA drew to a close, the sense of camaraderie amongst neighbors surpassed my wildest expectations. We stood, not simply as angry homeowners battling a self-righteous Gary, but as a vibrant community woven together by humor and a shared desire for change. With our hearts heavy with joy and our spirits light, we toasted to a night filled with laughter. As each neighbor shared their tales of HOA tyranny, it became clear that every chuckle was a battle cry of defiance against the status quo, with me leading the charge. In the days that followed, Jerry's iron rein began to loosen, the community enduring proudly in their newfound empowerment. I received emails not only filled with memes of the night, but also suggestions for legitimate changes we could pursue in our bylaws, real progress wrapped tightly in wit and sarcasm. I urged everyone to team up to draft a new document for the HOA, one that included mandatory weekly ice cream socials and an annual Gary Roast, a festival of mustachioed judges and flaming trucks, of course. As I sat with my laptop one morning, drafting away on the new proposals, I couldn't shake the anticipation that our story was only just beginning. No longer was our triumph simply about a truck, but a newfound fearlessness, not just for me, but for each homeowner daring to stand up and say no more. The sweet scent of revolution mixed with unyielding humor lingered in the air, a cacophony of laughter heralding the dawn of a new era for our neighborhood.